You're listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It's Monday, the 16th of December, 2024, and you're listening to episode 95 of The Observing Eye, coming at you live from the computer hell cabin. Every week we get psychological, philosophical, and all manner of introspective. I'm David, and this week we'll be denying death with Ernest Becker. Firstly, I just want to apologize because this episode is a day late, and obviously they usually come out on Sunday. Been a bit mad coming up to Christmas, so this one's going to be today, obviously, and I'm going to get one more in before Christmas, so it'll be this Sunday, which is the 22nd of December. So that'll be the last one before Christmas, and then we will be back in the new year. So we're going to have a little break of 2 weeks over Christmas just for some R&R, a little bit of time out, which should be good. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, let's get into a bit of Ernest Becker. Now, if you've ever found yourself pondering the big questions, why we're here, how we find meaning, or how we reconcile with the fact that one day our lives will end, this episode is for you. Nice morning one before Christmas. Becker's work doesn't shy away from these existential dilemmas. Instead, it faces them head-on, offering insights into how the awareness of our mortality shapes everything we do. Why does this matter? Because we live in a culture that avoids death at all costs. How often do we talk about death openly? Instead, we distract ourselves with work, achievements, entertainment, or even, heaven forbid, social media, anything to keep the thought of our mortality at bay. But according to Becker, this avoidance comes at a cost. It drives many of our anxieties, conflicts, and even societal problems. By understanding this, we can start to live more authentically, embracing life fully by confronting what we most fear. In this episode, I want to take you on a journey through Becker's central ideas. We'll explore how the fear of death is the invisible hand shaping human culture and behavior, how we create what Becker calls heroic projects to cope with this fear, and what happens when these defenses break down. We'll also look at how his work connects to modern psychology, from terror management theory, which is a good one, to the ways technology influences our relationship with mortality. Along the way, I'll share how Becker's ideas have influenced my own thinking, and I'll challenge you to reflect on how the awareness of death shapes your life, whether you realize it or not. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's embark on this little exploration together. By the end of the episode, my hope is that you will walk away not only with a deeper understanding of denial of death, but also with ways to think about your own life, your fears, and the meaning you create in the face of mortality. To understand Ernest Becker's denial of death, we need to start with its central thesis, the idea that human beings are unique because we possess the capacity for self-awareness. Unlike other animals, we not only live but are acutely aware that one day we will die. This awareness creates a rather profound existential dilemma. Becker argues that this dilemma is at the core of the human condition. On the one hand, we are physical creatures subject to the same biological limitations as any other animal. We eat, sleep, shit, and ultimately decay. On the other hand, we have the ability to think abstractly, to imagine futures, and to reflect on the nature of existence itself. This paradox, being both creature and creator, mortal and meaning seeker, is what Becker calls the human condition. The awareness of our mortality creates what Becker describes as death anxiety. This is not just the fear of physically dying, but a deeper, more pervasive anxiety tied to the realization that everything we build or achieve in life will one day vanish. It's the fear that our lives might ultimately lack meaning. But here's where Becker's brilliance comes in. He doesn't just describe the problem, he examines how humans cope with it. He suggests that most of our behaviors, cultural practices, and psychological mechanisms are rooted in an attempt to deny or transcend this awareness of death. He calls this the denial of death, and it's something that operates both individually and collectively. One of the ways we cope, according to Becker, is through what he terms symbolic immortality. While we know that our physical bodies are finite, we strive to leave behind something that will outlive us, whether it's children, art, ideas, or societal contributions. In this way, we achieve a sense of continuity and purpose, even in the face of our inevitable demise. Becker also draws heavily on psychoanalytic theory, particularly the work of Freud, to explain how we repress or redirect our death anxiety. He argues that much of what we consider everyday behavior, from ambition to relationships to our cultural norms, is a way of managing this underlying fear. We create structures, narratives, and belief systems that give our lives meaning and distract us from the inevitability of death. Yet this denial is not without its consequences. Becker warns that repressing the fear of death too much can lead to destructive behaviors, both personally and socially. We'll explore these consequences in later segments, but for now, it's important to recognize that this tension between the awareness of death and the denial of it is at the heart of human existence. So as we move forward, I'm going to invite you to reflect on your own relationship with mortality. How does the awareness of death shape your choices, your relationships, and the meaning that you create in your life? And how do you cope with the knowledge of your own finitude? Becker would argue that these are the most fundamental questions we can ask ourselves. Now that we've laid the groundwork for understanding death anxiety, let's dive into one of Ernest Becker's most fascinating concepts, the idea of the heroic project. This is the mechanism through which humans seek to transcend their mortality by striving for symbolic immortality. The heroic project can take many forms, but at its core, it's about leaving something behind that outlives us. This might be creating art, building a business, raising children, or even contributing to a larger cause. Becker argues that these projects provide us with a sense of purpose and help us feel that our lives are meaningful, even in the face of inevitable death. Whether it's the poet pouring their soul into a collection of verses or the teacher shaping the minds of the next generation, these acts extend our impact beyond the limitations of our own lifespan. Let's break it down further. According to Becker, the heroic project operates on two levels, the individual and the collective. On an individual level, it's about personal achievements and self-expression. Think about the painter working on a masterpiece or the entrepreneur building a groundbreaking company. These people are, in essence, reaching for immortality through their creations. They invest their energy and identity into something tangible that can carry their essence forward, even after they are gone. On a collective level, the heroic project connects us to something bigger than ourselves. This is where cultural systems come in, religion, nationalism, or even societal progress. These systems provide a framework for individuals to contribute to something enduring. For example, the scientist might dedicate their life to advancing human knowledge, while a soldier might see their actions as protecting a nation's legacy. In both cases, the individual effort is tied to a larger narrative of meaning, giving the person a sense of belonging and purpose within a greater whole. These collective projects also have the power to unite people, offering shared rituals and values that strengthen the bonds within communities. But here's the catch. The heroic project is not without its own tension. For one, it requires us to balance individuality with the demands of collective cultural systems. While we might strive to express ourselves uniquely, our projects are often shaped by societal expectations and norms. For instance, an artist might feel pressured to conform to popular trends to gain recognition, even if it compromises their personal vision. Similarly, collective projects like religion or nationalism can sometimes demand conformity or suppress dissent to maintain cohesion. This balancing act can lead to inner conflicts where the desire to create something authentic clashes with the pressures to fit within established systems. And then there's the issue of validation. In the modern world where social media dominates, the heroic project often becomes entangled with external validation. People chase likes, followers, or fame as a way to prove their worth and ensure their symbolic immortality. The need for recognition can sometimes overshadow the deeper motivations for engaging in a heroic project. Does this kind of validation really satisfy our deeper need for meaning? Or does it leave us feeling even more disconnected from ourselves and others? Often, the pursuit of superficial approval leads to a hollow sense of accomplishment, failing to provide the lasting sense of purpose that we crave. Another layer to consider is the way heroic projects can be shaped by historical and cultural shifts. In times of peace and stability, the projects might focus on art, education, or innovation. During periods of upheaval, they might pivot to survival, defense, or rebuilding. These shifts reveal how interconnected our individual pursuits are with the broader context of the societies we live in. They remind us that while our heroic projects may feel deeply personal, they are also profoundly influenced by the collective circumstances around us. As we consider Becker's idea of the heroic project, I'd like to challenge you to think about your own life. What are your heroic projects? How do you strive for symbolic immortality, and what drives those efforts? Are your pursuits authentic expressions of your values, or do they reflect societal pressures and expectations? Are you building something that aligns with your deepest passions, or are you chasing a vision imposed by others? These questions are not going to have easy answers, but grappling with them is a key part of living a meaningful life in the face of mortality. Perhaps the most heroic act of all is to pursue projects that not only reflect our individuality, but also contribute to the collective good, leaving the world just a little bit better than we found it. If the heroic project provides individuals with a means to cope with death anxiety, then culture and religion offer the broader scaffolding on which those projects are built. Becker saw culture as a collective response to the problem of mortality, a system designed to give human life meaning and coherence. In other words, culture provides the narratives and rituals that help us face the reality of death without being paralyzed by fear. Let's start with religion. For thousands of years, religions around the world have provided frameworks for understanding life and death. Whether through the promise of an afterlife, reincarnation, or union with a higher power, religious beliefs often assure us that death is not the end. Becker viewed religion as one of humanity's most profound responses to mortality, offering not just consolation, but a way to integrate the awareness of death into daily life. Rituals, prayers, and sacred texts all serve to reaffirm the individual's place within a cosmic order that transcends death. These traditions give people a sense of belonging and a role in a grander story, one that transcends individual existence. Religious practices also provide tangible ways to confront mortality. Consider funeral rites, which honor the dead while simultaneously reminding the living of their own impermanence. Such rituals create a shared space for grief, reflection, and connection, making the prospect of death less isolating. Across cultures, these practices have evolved to include meditative prayers, sacred pilgrimages, and community gatherings that link human life to something eternal and unchanging. These frameworks do more than console. They actively shape how individuals approach their mortality with courage and grace. But what happens in societies where religion no longer holds the same sway? This is where secular culture steps in, creating its own forms of meaning. For instance, nationalism often functions as a kind of secular religion, uniting individuals around a shared history, identity, and purpose. National holidays, monuments, and patriotic rituals serve to connect individuals to a collective narrative, offering a sense of continuity that mirrors religious structures. Similarly, the arts, science, and even consumer culture can provide avenues for individuals to pursue symbolic immortality. Becker also noted that the shift from religious to secular frameworks brings its own challenges. Without the unifying narratives of traditional religion, individuals in secular societies may struggle more acutely with feelings of isolation and meaninglessness. The result is often a fragmented culture in which people seek meaning through more individualized pursuits such as career success, self-expression, or personal branding. While these can be fulfilling, they often lack the communal and transcendent qualities that religion traditionally provided. This leaves many individuals vulnerable to existential despair as they grapple with the question, what happens to me, to all of this, when I'm gone? Another interesting dimension of this shift is the rise of substitute rituals in secular contexts. Take the phenomena of social media, for example. Platforms like Instagram or Facebook have become spaces where people construct digital legacies, often treating their online presence as a kind of monument to their existence. Posting achievements, life milestones, or even carefully created images can serve as a way to leave behind a mark that outlives one's physical self. Yet, as Becker might argue, these substitutes often fail to provide the depth and transcendence that traditional rituals offered. They are fragmented, fleeting, and tied to external validation, leaving many people feeling unfulfilled despite their best efforts. One of Becker's key insights is that all cultures, whether religious or secular, are ultimately human constructions. They are ways of ordering the chaos of existence, of turning the finite nature of life into something that feels eternal. However, this also means that cultures are inherently fragile. When cultural systems break down, whether through war, social upheaval, or the loss of faith, the individuals within them are left exposed to the raw terror of death. Think of moments in history where societies have faced existential crises, from the collapse of ancient civilizations to the disillusionment of modern times. These periods often force individuals to confront mortality in its starkest form, leading either to renewed creativity and cultural rebirth or to widespread despair. So here's the question I'd like to pose to you at this point. How does your culture shape your understanding of mortality? Do you find meaning through religious beliefs, secular ideals, or some combination of the two? How do you participate in rituals, whether sacred or modern, that help you make sense of life's impermanence? And what happens when those systems fail to provide the comfort or coherence you need? Becker would argue that these are not just personal questions, but deeply cultural ones, reflecting the shared human struggle to face death with a bit of courage and creativity. Perhaps the challenge then is not simply to choose between religion or secularism, but to find or create systems that address our deepest existential needs with a bit of honesty and a bit of depth. Ernest Becker's ideas are as relevant today as ever, and perhaps even more so given the complexities that all of us face today. In a world driven by consumerism, individualism, and technological innovation, we see new ways in which the denial of death manifests and shapes our behavior. Take consumer culture, for example. At its core, consumerism promises fulfillment through material possessions, experiences, and achievements. But beneath this, as Becker might argue, is the same fundamental anxiety about mortality. We accumulate goods, strive for status, and pursue lifestyles that signal our significance, all in an effort to stave off the underlying fear that our lives are finite. Advertising often taps into this fear, offering products as solutions to existential questions, even if only temporarily. This pattern reflects a deeper cultural narrative where material success becomes a stand-in for eternal relevance. For many, the act of acquiring or displaying wealth serves as a personal story of triumph against the inevitable passage of time. The self-help industry is another area where you all know how much I love the self-help industry, is another area where Becker's ideas come into play. Much of self-help focuses on achieving success, happiness, or personal transformation. While these goals are valuable, they can also serve as forms of death denial, giving people the illusion of control over their lives and destinies. Self-help books often promise the secret to mastering time, career, or relationships, suggesting that with enough effort we can perfect our existence. However, Becker's critique might encourage us to question whether these pursuits truly address our deeper fears or simply distract us from them. Are we seeking growth for authentic self-discovery, or are we engaging in an endless cycle of self-improvement to mask our vulnerabilities? And then there's technology. Digital immortality is becoming a real consideration in our time. Social media allows people to leave behind a digital footprint that outlasts their physical existence. From memorialized Facebook profiles to AI simulations of deceased loved ones, don't get me started on that, technology offers new ways to grapple with mortality. Virtual reality and digital archives have also emerged as methods to extend our presence into the future. However, this raises important questions. Does this digital legacy truly satisfy our need for symbolic immortality? Or does it just create new anxieties about what we leave behind and how we are remembered? For many, the pursuit of a polished online persona becomes a project not only of self-presentation, but also of legacy building, a modern attempt to outwit death by ensuring an enduring mark on the digital landscape. Another aspect of this denial can be found in how we invest our time and energy into distractions that keep mortality at bay. Whether through endless entertainment, productivity hacks, or escapist hobbies, we seek to fill our days with purpose and motion. Becker's insight suggests that these behaviors, while understandable, often obscure the underlying need to confront our finite existence head-on. Instead of seeking meaning in external validations or distractions, Becker's philosophy urges us to turn inward and ask, are these pursuits genuinely enriching our lives, or are they simply ways to delay uncomfortable truths? As we work our way through all of these modern challenges, Becker's message is very clear. Confronting death, rather than denying it, is the path to living authentically. By acknowledging our mortality, we can break free from the distractions and illusions that dominate much of modern life and focus on what truly matters. The ability to face our fears and integrate the reality of death into our daily lives can lead to a profound clarity and purpose. In embracing this mindset, we may find that our lives become not just a race against time, but a celebration of the fleeting beauty that makes life so meaningful in the first place. Becker's influence extends into modern psychology, most notably through the development of terror management theory, or TMT, not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, terror management theory. Teenage Mutant Turtles, for God's sake, this psychological framework explores how our awareness of mortality influences human behavior, from the personal to the societal level. TMT builds on Becker's insights, offering a structured way to study how existential fears shape human motivation and decision-making. TMT, I have to be careful not to say TNT. TMT posits that much of human behavior is motivated by the need to manage death anxiety. When reminded of their mortality, people often respond by clinging more tightly to their cultural beliefs and identities. This is known as the mortality salience effect. For instance, studies have shown that reminders of death can lead to stronger in-group favoritism and out-group hostility, as people seek security in their cultural frameworks. These responses underscore how cultural worldview serves as buffers against existential fear, providing meaning, purpose, and a sense of continuity. On an individual level, TMT shares light on common psychological defenses. Repression, denial, projection, and hero worship are all ways in which people manage existential fears. Think about how celebrity culture functions by elevating certain individuals to almost heroic status. Society creates symbols of immortality that distracts from our own mortality. Similarly, perfectionism and workaholism can be seen as attempts to achieve a kind of symbolic permanence, as people strive to leave behind a legacy that transcends their physical existence. In the realm of relationships, TMT explains why close bonds can both soothe and amplify death anxiety. On the one hand, intimate relationships provide comfort and a sense of belonging, offering a shield against existential fear. On the other hand, conflicts within these relationships can provoke feelings of vulnerability, reminding us of our inherent mortality. This duality highlights the ways in which interpersonal dynamics intertwine with our deepest existential concerns. But Becker's ideas also offer us some hope. By understanding these psychological mechanisms, we can begin to confront death anxiety in healthier ways. Therapy, particularly approaches rooted in existential psychology, which was my favorite, encourages individuals to face their fears openly and develop a more authentic relationship with mortality. Mindfulness practices, which cultivate presence and acceptance, can also help individuals live more fully in the moment, rather than being consumed by fear of the future. Philosophical reflection provides yet another avenue for grappling with death anxiety, inviting individuals to explore profound questions about meaning, purpose, and the nature of existence. Modern psychology has also begun to integrate Becker's insights into practical applications. For example, interventions aimed at reducing mortality salience, such as encouraging gratitude, creating community, or promoting altruistic behaviors, have shown promise in mitigating some of the defensive reactions tied to death anxiety. These practices not only help individuals manage their fears, but also contribute to greater social cohesion and empathy. While the denial of death can inspire human creativity and achievement, Ernest Becker warns that it also carries a darker, more destructive side. When our mechanisms for managing death anxiety become rigid or distorted, they can lead to harmful behaviors on both individual and societal levels. This shadow side of denial often manifests in ways that exacerbate division, conflict, and suffering rather than creating unity and understanding. Let's begin with tribalism. Becker observed that when people feel existentially threatened, they often retreat into in-group identities. By aligning with a group, whether it's defined by nationality, religion, ethnicity, or ideology, individuals can feel a sense of security and symbolic immortality. These groups provide shared narratives and rituals that reinforce a collective sense of purpose. However, the same instinct can lead to exclusion, hostility, and even violence toward those perceived as outsiders. Historically, many of humanity's darkest moments, from religious wars to genocide, have been fueled by this dynamic. In such cases, the fear of death is displaced onto the other, scapegoating them as the source of all threats. Scapegoating, another shadow of death denial, allows individuals and groups to externalize their anxieties by projecting them onto a convenient target. By blaming others, whether it's immigrants, political opponents, or marginalized communities, societies create the illusion of control over chaos. This mechanism not only distracts from the underlying fear of mortality, but also perpetuates cycles of oppression and violence. Becker's insights reveal how these destructive behaviors are not merely political or social phenomena, but deeply rooted in our psychological need to protect ourselves from existential dread. On an individual level, the shadow side of denial can take the form of perfectionism or workaholism. Many people channel their fear of death into obsessive pursuits of success or control, believing that if they achieve enough, they can overcome their finitude. While these efforts can drive innovation and excellence, they often come at the cost of mental health, relationships, and authentic fulfillment. Perfectionism, for example, turns the pursuit of meaning into an unattainable standard, leaving individuals trapped in cycles of self-criticism and burnout. Similarly, workaholism prioritizes productivity over connection, as individuals pour themselves into careers at the expense of personal growth and joy. Another manifestation of the shadow side is ideological extremism. When individuals or groups cling too tightly to a particular worldview, they can become intolerant of ambiguity or dissent. This rigidity often stems from an unconscious need to defend the symbolic structures that provide meaning against any perceived threat. In Becker's terms, this represents an overinvestment in cultural worldviews as buffers against death anxiety. The result is an inability to engage with differing perspectives, leading to polarization, dogmatism, and in extreme cases, violence. Addiction, too, can be understood through Becker's lens as a form of distorted death denial. Substances or behaviors that provide temporary relief from existential anxiety, whether through numbing, distraction, or euphoria, can become destructive when used as substitutes for genuine engagement with life. Addiction often arises from a deep sense of meaninglessness or alienation as individuals seek escape from the very fears they avoid confronting. These individual and collective behaviors illustrate what Becker called the immortality projects gone awry. While the drive for symbolic immortality can lead to great achievements, it can also become destructive when pursued at the expense of others or when it disconnects us from the realities of our shared humanity. The darker consequences of death denial highlight the need for greater awareness and balance in how we respond to our mortality. So what can we do to address the shadow side? I'd like to try and give you some pointers in this. Becker's work suggests that the first step is acknowledging our mortality rather than repressing or denying it. By bringing our fears into conscious awareness, we can begin to navigate them a bit more constructively. Practices like mindfulness therapy or philosophical reflection can help individuals confront their anxieties in a safe and supportive environment. On a societal level, encouraging dialogue and empathy is crucial. When we recognize that all humans grapple with the same existential fears, it becomes harder to dehumanize those who are different from us. Education and cross-cultural exchange can help break down that rigid us versus them mentality that fuels tribalism and scapegoating. By emphasizing our shared vulnerability and interdependence, we can build systems that prioritize collaboration over competition. Ultimately, Becker's insights challenge us to transform the way we think about death and its impact on our lives. The shadow side of denial reveals the consequences of avoiding this confrontation, but it also points toward the potential for growth and transformation. When we face death with honesty and with courage, we open the door to living more authentically, embracing both the light and the shadow of our human condition. If the denial of death represents humanity's unconscious struggle against mortality, then the authentic response to mortality lies in facing it head on. Ernest Becker's work challenges us to move beyond avoidance and repression, offering a pathway to a deeper, more meaningful engagement with life. The authentic response is not about conquering death, but about integrating its reality into our daily existence in a way that transforms how we live. To begin with, an authentic response to mortality requires us to embrace our vulnerability. Acknowledging that we are finite beings can feel overwhelming, but it is also liberating. By confronting the inevitability of death, we strip away many of the illusions and distractions that cloud our lives. This confrontation allows us to ask big questions. What truly matters to me? How do I want to spend the time that I have? When we stop avoiding these questions, we open ourselves up to living with a greater intentionality and clarity. Becker's insights align with existential thinkers like Martin Heidegger, who argued that being toward death is essential for authenticity. For Heidegger, recognizing our mortality enables us to live more authentically, making choices that reflect our true selves rather than conforming to societal expectations. Similarly, Viktor Frankl's logotherapy emphasizes the importance of finding meaning in life, even in the face of suffering and death. Frankl's concept of bearing witness to our mortality echoes Becker's call to confront our fears rather than suppress them. One practical way to engage with mortality is through mindfulness. Now, I talk about mindfulness a lot in this podcast, but I think it's useful. And hopefully, if any of you have tried it, you'll be in the same mindset as myself. Mindfulness practices encourage us to stay present, creating an awareness of life's impermanence without judgment. Meditating on the breath, for example, can serve as a powerful reminder of the fragility of life. Each inhale and exhale symbolizing the continuous ebb and flow of existence. Mindfulness, of course, doesn't erase the fear of death, but it helps us to approach it with greater equanimity, allowing us to experience life more fully in the here and now. Another avenue is creative expression. Art, music, writing, and other forms of creativity provide opportunities to grapple with the themes of impermanence and meaning. By channeling our fears and reflections into something tangible, we not only process our emotions, but also contribute to the collective human story. Creativity becomes a way of transforming the raw reality of mortality into beauty, connection, and legacy. It's no coincidence that many of humanity's greatest works, from ancient epics to modern masterpieces, deal with death and the search for meaning. Relationships also play a crucial role in the authentic response to mortality. Becker reminds us that love and connection are among the most powerful antidotes to existential fear. When we nurture meaningful relationships, we create bonds that transcend the limitations of individual existence. Acts of kindness, empathy, and shared vulnerability not only enrich our lives, but also leave an enduring impact on those around us. These connections remind us that while we may be finite as individuals, we are part of a greater web of life. Equally important is the willingness to engage in philosophical reflection. Asking questions about the nature of existence, purpose, and mortality can be hugely transformative. It's kind of why I do this thing. Philosophy doesn't offer us easy answers, it never does, but it provides us a framework for exploring the complexities of the human condition. For some, this might involve reading the works of existentialists like Camus, who embrace the absurdity of life while finding freedom in it. For others, it could mean exploring spiritual traditions that offer perspectives on death and transcendence. Becker's work also challenges us to reframe our heroic projects. Rather than pursuing symbolic immortality through status, achievement, or material success, the authentic response involves aligning our projects with values that reflect our deepest truths. This might mean dedicating ourselves to causes that promote justice, sustainability, or community well-being. It could also involve creating art, raising a family, or simply living in a way that reflects kindness and integrity. Authenticity in this context is not about escaping death, but about embracing life in all of its fragility and wonder. There is also a societal dimension to the authentic response. Recognizing our shared mortality can create greater empathy and solidarity. When we understand that all humans grapple with the same existential fears, it becomes easier to transcend divisions and work towards common goals. This perspective can inspire movements for social justice, environmental stewardship, and global cooperation. Becker's call to face mortality is not just an individual challenge, but a collective one, urging us to build cultures that honor life's impermanence while celebrating its possibilities. Finally, the authentic response to mortality invites us to cultivate some gratitude. The awareness of death can heighten our appreciation for the simple, fleeting moments that make life meaningful. Don't laugh, but I'm going to say these things. A sunrise, a shared laugh, moment of humor, a quiet moment of reflection. These experiences, albeit maybe a little too poetic, take on greater significance when they are viewed through the lens of impermanence. Gratitude helps us to shift from a mindset of fear and scarcity to one of abundance and presence, allowing us to savor the time that we have. Of course, living authentically in the face of mortality is not easy. When is any of this stuff ever easy? It requires some courage, some introspection, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But the rewards are profound. By embracing our finitude, we can free ourselves from the constraints of denial and distraction, discovering a deeper sense of purpose and connection. Becker's work reminds us that death, rather than being an enemy to be avoided, can be a teacher, guiding us toward a life of greater authenticity and fulfillment. As influential as Ernest Becker's denial of death is, it has not been without its critics. While his work has been celebrated for its bold synthesis of psychology, anthropology, and philosophy, some scholars and thinkers have raised questions about its assumptions, its implications, and its relevance in today's world. In this, our final segment, we will explore these critiques, evaluate their merit, and consider counter-arguments that reaffirm Becker's enduring significance. One of the most common critiques of denial of death centers on its reliance on Freudian psychoanalysis. Becker's framework draws heavily on Freud's ideas, particularly the concepts of repression and the unconscious. Critics argue that Freud's theories, while groundbreaking in their time, have since been challenged or even discredited by advancements in psychology and neuroscience. For example, many contemporary psychologists reject Freud's emphasis on repressed desires as overly speculative and unscientific. As a result, some dismiss Becker's work as being built on a shaky foundation. However, Becker's defenders point out that his use of Freudian concepts is more metaphorical than literal. Rather than adhering rigidly to Freud's theories, Becker reinterprets them to address broader existential concerns. His focus is less on specific psychosexual dynamics and more on the universal human struggle with mortality. By framing Freud's ideas within the context of existential psychology, Becker breathed a new life into them, making them relevant for exploring these questions about life and death. Another critique targets Becker's emphasis on death anxiety as the central driver of human behavior. Some argue that this perspective oversimplifies the complexity of human motivation. After all, people are influenced by a wide range of factors, biological, social, economic, and cultural, that cannot all be reduced to fear of mortality. For instance, evolutionary psychologists might emphasize the role of survival instincts and reproductive strategies over existential concerns, while sociologists might highlight the influence of social structures and norms. Yet this critique may underestimate the depth of Becker's argument. While he does position death anxiety as a fundamental motivator, he does not claim it is the only one. Instead, he sees it as a foundational layer underlying many other aspects of human behavior. For example, the desire for status, achievement, or connection can all be understood as ways of seeking symbolic immortality. By tracing these motivations back to their existential roots, Becker provides a unifying framework that complements rather than contradicts other perspectives. Another area of criticism lies in the perceived pessimism of denial of death. Some readers find Becker's depiction of humanity's existential plight to be bleak and disheartening. By framing life as a constant struggle against the fear of death, his work can seem to offer little hope for transcendence or peace. Critics argue that this worldview risks trapping individuals in a cycle of despair where even heroic projects are seen as futile attempts to escape mortality. However, many who engage deeply with Becker's work see it not as pessimistic but as profoundly honest. By confronting the uncomfortable truths of human existence, Becker invites us to live more authentically. His call to acknowledge and integrate our mortality is not a message of despair, but one of liberation. When we accept the limits of our existence, we can break free from illusions and distractions, finding meaning in the very impermanence of life. Far from being bleak, this perspective offers a way to live with greater clarity, purpose, and gratitude. A similar critique involves Becker's focus on individual psychology at the expense of collective or systemic issues. Some critics argue that his emphasis on personal confrontation with mortality overlooks the social, political, and economic structures that shape human behavior. For instance, systemic inequality, oppression, and environmental degradation are not merely byproducts of individual death denial, but are also rooted in broader power dynamics and historical forces. By focusing so heavily on the psychological dimension, Becker's framework risks ignoring these larger contexts. Now, this critique highlights an important limitation of Becker's work, but it also opens the door to new interpretations and applications. While denial of death focuses primarily on the individual, its insights can be extended to collective dynamics. For example, tribalism and scapegoating, which Becker identifies as defense mechanisms against death anxiety, can be understood as contributing to systemic issues like nationalism and discrimination. By integrating Becker's ideas with sociological and political analysis, we can provide a more comprehensive understanding of how death denial shapes both individual and collective behavior. Finally, some question whether Becker's ideas are still relevant in today's world. Since the publication of Denial of Death in 1973, society has undergone some pretty significant changes, including the rise of digital technology, globalization, and shifting cultural norms. Critics wonder whether Becker's insights, rooted in mid-20th century psychoanalytic thought, can adequately address the complexities of contemporary life. In response to this, many argue that Becker's work is more relevant now than ever. In an age of social media, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence, the question of how we cope with mortality has taken on new dimensions. Digital legacies, virtual avatars, and the pursuit of online validation all reflect modern forms of symbolic immortality. By revisiting Becker's ideas in light of these developments, we can gain some valuable insights into how humanity's ancient struggle with death continues to evolve. Ultimately, the critiques of denial of death do not diminish its significance, but enrich our understanding of its implications. By engaging with these critiques, we deepen our appreciation for Becker's courage in tackling some of life's most profound questions. His work challenges us to look beyond easy answers and to grapple with the complexities of existence. As we do so, we honor not only Becker's legacy, but also the ongoing human quest for meaning in the face of mortality. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say on Ernest Becker and the denial of death. As we come to the close of this deep dive into Ernest Becker's denial of death, it is clear that his work continues to resonate with the human condition. From his exploration of death anxiety to the heroic projects we undertake to cope with our own mortality, Becker's insights challenge us to confront some of life's most fundamental questions. How do we live knowing that we will die? How do we find meaning in the face of impermanence? And what can we learn about ourselves from the ways we deny, repress, or embrace our finitude? Throughout this episode, we've journeyed through Becker's core ideas. We began with the central thesis of denial of death, that the awareness of our mortality is a uniquely human burden, one that drives much of our behavior. We explored the concept of the heroic project, the ways in which individuals seek symbolic immortality through achievements, relationships, and cultural contributions. We examined how culture and religion offer frameworks for navigating death anxiety, and how modern phenomena like consumerism, technology, and the heaven forbid self-help industry reflect new forms of this denial. We've also discussed the psychological and societal consequences of avoiding mortality, from tribalism and scapegoating to perfectionism and addiction. Then we shifted focus to what Becker called us toward, an authentic response to mortality. By acknowledging our fears and integrating the reality of death into our lives, we can live with greater purpose, clarity, and connection. Becker's message is not one of despair but of liberation, an invitation to move beyond distraction and denial and toward a life of meaning grounded in our shared human experience. Of course, no exploration of Becker's work would be complete without addressing the critiques and counter-arguments that challenge his ideas. Whether it's the reliance on Freudian theory, the perceived pessimism of his worldview, or questions about the contemporary relevance of his insights, these critiques enrich the discussion, reminding us that denial of death is not a closed book but an ongoing conversation. It is a testament to Becker's courage that his work provokes such thoughtful engagement even decades after its publication. So where does this leave us? Becker's work is not a set of instructions, but a lens through which to view our lives and the world around us. His ideas encourage us to ask ourselves the hard questions. What are the heroic projects I am pursuing? Are they aligned with my deepest values, or are they driven by fear and societal expectation? How do I confront death, not just in abstract terms, but in my daily actions and relationships? And how can I use the awareness of mortality to live more fully and authentically? As you think about these questions, remember that there is no single right way to navigate the human condition. Becker's work is a reminder that life's complexity is both a challenge and a gift. The inevitability of death can feel overwhelming, but it is also what gives life its urgency and beauty. By embracing this duality, we can move closer to a life of meaning, connection, and gratitude. Before I wrap up, let's consider one final thought. Becker's work is ultimately about freedom. Not freedom from death, which is, of course, sadly impossible, but freedom to live in its shadow without being paralyzed by fear. It's about recognizing that the fear of death is a shared human experience, one that unites us across cultures, generations, and beliefs. And in that recognition lies the possibility for empathy, solidarity, and transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey through denial of death. I hope that this exploration has sparked some new insights and reflections for you, whether it's inspired you to confront your own fears, rethink your priorities, or simply appreciate the fleeting moments that make life meaningful. If you haven't already, I will encourage you to go and read Becker's work for yourself and to think about it from your own perspective. Go and get some first-hand evidence. Don't rely on this old internet troll to give you the information you need. Find out for yourself. Question everything. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to here comes the formal bit at the end. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast, leaving us a review, or sharing it with others who you think might find it interesting. Your support helps us to continue to bring you this sort of content. As always, if anything in this episode has resonated with you in any way, then I would love to hear from you. You can share your stories on our beautiful new website at theobservingeye.com or on social media. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@theobservingeye and on TikTok and Instagram with the handle @theobservingeye as well. Don't forget, you can also email me on david@theobservingeye.com. Take care, everybody. Much love. I'll catch you soon.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope it's been useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writing or work around psychology, philosophy, and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.com. And that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.